Hi everyone, just back from holidays, and today's video I'll be checking out the current meta as provided by 40k Stats. This fantastic resource is maintained by the team at Warhammer, and if you enjoy stats and numbers, this is a place for you. 40k Stats went quiet for a while before Warhammer took over, and there is a quantity of data for Chapter Approved released in June last year, Warzone Nukmun released in January this year, and of course Warzone Nephilim released in June this year. There's also been several iterations of the balanced data slate, and I'll try to factor this in and any codex updates along the way. So looking at my Excel sheet, let's start with the games played by faction. I've conditionally formatted so that green is a higher number and red a lower. Focus less on the exact numbers, but more on the colour as it compares to the other factions in the same up and down column. As said, 40k Stats went quiet for a while before Warhammer picked it up, and this explains why Chapter Approved 2021 has a lot less games. But you can see the armies that had the most amount of play in Chapter Approved 2021 were by and large those that had a new codex. For example, Death Guard, Necrons and Space Marines. Interestingly, Custodies also saw a lot of play, and probably because their points stayed the same in the transition from 8th to 9th edition, when most other armies became more expensive. Step forward 6 months, and Custodies, Tau and Tyranids became the most popular, given they all had new codexes released. Now looking at Nephilim, Chaos Space Marines have seen a surge in play, given their 9th edition codex was finally released. At the time of writing, only 2 armies don't yet have a 9th edition codex, and you can see how little play Astra Militarum and Chaos Demons get. Interestingly, Astra Militarum still sees a reasonable level of play when viewed against some other armies like Mechanicus or Deathwatch, which speaks to the popularity and stubborn determination of Astra Militarum commanders like me and you. Also of interest in Nephilim is resurgence in relative popularity of Sisters of Battle, Death Guard and Necrons. Now, exposing the win rates of each faction across the different mission packs, you can see that there is a somewhat relationship between how many people play a faction and its win rate. This speaks a little to meta chasers, or competitive players going after the latest hot datasheet stratagem combo. This is clearly evident with Custodies, Craftworlds, Tau and Tyranids, which all enjoyed some crazy win rates with their new codexes in the Nukmun era, before being balanced in the data slate and the new mission pack of Nephilim. My opinion towards this is whatever. We all play 40k for different reasons, and some people would happily buy 2,000 points of the new codex, rush a paint job in the time it takes me to paint 5 guardsmen. As to Astra Militarum, you can see we've stayed consistently shite, usually always been dead last despite admittedly a lot of new rules for the Cadians and all those from the balanced data slates. A comment one of you made on a post of mine is that our poor win rate could be testament to the popularity of Astra Militarum. For a new inexperienced Astra Militarum commander playing at their first tournament, given our weak rule set, they could lose 5 games of 5, whilst a new Drukhari player may win 3 games of 5 on the back of their strong rule set. With this in mind, the novice Astra Militarum player scoring understandably poorly means the better scores of successful Astra Militarum players will be washed down. This isn't me discouraging anybody from attending their first tournament, but simply trying to understand our true position. Personally, my best performance has been 2 wins, 2 narrow losses and 1 thumping at a London tournament a couple of months ago. There are of course some much stronger performances out there for Astra Militarum, and there's a much talked about Paris Grand Tournament being of note. I'd say all the recent rule changes and new secondaries give us a fighting chance for the experienced player, and I'll look at these in a little bit later. In Nephilim, there have been some interesting changes as I expose the last of the spreadsheet. Here you can see the win rate change between Nukmund and Nephilim, with some pretty big swings off the back of the point changes and new secondary objectives. Custodies, Tau and Tyranids all got a big cut, sitting at a more modest win rate of about 51%, while Sisters, Death Guards and Necrons have all bounced back in a big way, with Armour of Contempt benefiting Sisters and Death Guard, and some rule changes really helping the Necrons. Harlequins are still at a crazy 60% win rate even after a minor nerf, and it's great to see Blood Angels and Orcs back at about a 50% win rate. Mechanicus are now almost as terrible as Guard, completely falling from the dizzying heights they enjoyed in Chapter Approved 2020, whilst poor old Deathwatch now do worse than Astra Militarum, albeit with only a few games played. Eyeballing Nephilim win rates, it feels a bit more balanced, with less armies having a score rate in the 60%, which usually makes for a less enjoyable experience for the opposing player as they face some frankly ridiculous rule sets. So the current meta sees Harlequins being the strongest, Necrons and Sisters enjoying a revitalisation, and the usual offenders still being very strong, including Custodes and Tyranids. Okay, let's look a bit deeper at Astra Militarum as the Goonhammer page has further analysis. Here we can see how we fare against other factions. There's only limited data for Nephilim, given we're only 2 months in, but it's interesting to see win rates at 40+%. Some matchups continue to be terrible and pulling down the overall average, including Sisters, Custodes and Tyranids, whilst it is disappointing to see our traditional good matchups against any Chaos army have worsened, and likewise against Necrons and Orcs. Favourable matchups include Mechanicus, all Space Marine flavours, Imperial Knights and to my disbelief apparently Harlequins. I guess this data helps you mentally prepare yourself as you walk into a game as to whether the odds are in your favour. Goonhammer also has faction specific secondary objectives and the average points achieved for each. To my surprise, Inflexible Command scores a very strong 11.49 average, ahead of Boots on the ground at 10, and Special Orders and by Lasgun and Bayonet unsurprisingly sucking at 6.6 and 4.4. What's also interesting about Inflexible Command is that it's actually the second highest scoring secondary objective of all secondaries, after a Necron secondary objective. This is obviously fantastic and makes sense given it can be scored from turn 1 and gets easier as your army shrinks from casualties. This is a positive sign that victory can be squeezed out if an army list is built around this secondary, but I do find it is often hard to match it to other secondary objectives. By its restrictive nature, holding primary should actually be easier, given you're kind of forced to hold units back, so able to have more bodies sitting on an objective. Boot to the ground at 10 points is a strong performance, and maybe Astra Militarum commanders are choosing between Inflexible or Boots, and then going after other secondaries depending on these two. Personally, I built a list that lets me do either, with the basic thought process being Boots on the ground against an enemy that can't easily screen at my deep striking Hades breach and drills with banner equipped command squads, paired with retrieve Nukmun data via 2 Scion squads, or Inflexible Command against an opponent who can effectively screen, on account for 3 tank commanders, 2 platoon commanders and 2 command squads. Picking other effective secondaries for Inflexible I find quite tough, with hopefully Razor banners being an option in some mats, or one determined by your opponent's army list composition. And if you've had any success choosing effective secondaries, I'd love to honestly hear about them, so please put them in the comments. And very finally, 40k Stats has sub-faction breakdown, and interestingly, you can see Cadia sees the most play, and Unknown, which I assume are custom doctrines, is the next most popular. Unknown and Catagen both post a 40% win rate, which is marginally better than Cadia, and it's a bummer that Cadia isn't doing better given the dedicated rules available. A final note, Vestroyan posts a 60% win rate, which is really puzzling. It's only had 10 games played, but there could be something to be said to their doctrine giving an additional 6-inch range to heavy and rapid fire weapons, the infantry order allowing all weapons to be shot in engagement range, and the stratagem which gives a +1 ballistic skill to any Vestroyan unit. I've been speaking with one of you in the comments about applying this to a Baneblade, making our super heavy model suddenly hitting on 3+. Very, very spicy. So yep, there you have it. The current meta and how Astra Militarum is performing, which to no surprise is still terrible. Thanks for watching. Bench Platoon, sound off. Tank Commander Glenn. Tank Commander Mitchell. Tank Commander Watchdog Van Etten. Colour Sergeant DuPont. Sergeants Brady, Nadal, Gilliam, the Colonel Merrill, Veterans Gibson, Hall, Lundeen, Guardsman Flint, Hills, Malik, Nitton, Nguyen, Smith, Tom, Tompkin, Conscript England.